Super nice to see everyone here today. My name's Alice, and I'm the event coordinator for TSI this year. And so today we're here to share about a bit about college admission processes for American universities. And what better way to do that but to ask our fellow Talaria alumni. And so we're here today with 4 amazing Talaria alumni who are all participants in the program last year. And so we have Graciela, Brianna, Evelyn, Emily, and they've all just graduated high school and they're going to their respective universities in the fall, which means they're going to have the most recent firsthand experience with college admissions. So thank you guys all for taking time out of your day to share a bit about your experience and your journey. And yeah, whenever you're ready, feel free to introduce your name, your pronouns, and then the university you'll be heading for the fall.
I can go ahead and start. Hi, my name's Emily. Nice to see everyone. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from the Bay Area and I will be attending UCLA in the fall.
I can go next. Hi guys, it's nice to be here today. I'm Brianna or Bria. I'm from the New Jersey, New York area, and I will be attending Barnard College of Columbia in the fall. Oh, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi everyone, my name is Evelyn. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm from New York City, and I'll be attending Princeton in the fall.
Hi guys, hope you can hear me okay. My audio is a little iffy sometimes, but my name is Graciela, or you can say Ella if it's easier for you. I'm from Richmond, Texas, which is just outside of Houston. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to be going to Caltech or California Institute of Technology in the fall.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your introductions. So we have a list of already compiled questions from Talaria participants from this year. So I'll just be going through those questions for our panelists to answer. But if any participants have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat below or message them to me. And so the first question for us panelists today, for our panelists today is, what program or major are you entering in the fall and why have you chosen that program?
I guess we can just go in the same order. I will be majoring in psychobiology or biopsychology, whatever you like to go by. It's a combination major of psychology and biology. And so it's like in the neuroscience, pre-med kind of realm. And that's one of the subjects that I did my project on last summer. I did it on sort of neurodegeneration, and I took AP Bio and I took AP Psych, and those are my favorite subjects. And when I was applying to schools, I saw that there was a psychobio major, and I was like, this is perfect for me. And it puts me on the track to be pre-med. So if I decide that I want to go to med school, I will be set up for that. And if I decide I just want to do research, I'll also be set up for that. And it's something I'm really interested in. And so, yeah.
Okay, we're keeping the same order. So I'm going to be majoring in environmental science and public health this fall, which is like Emily, kind of in the same realm as the research I did through Talaria. And then I will also be part of Barnard's Science Pathways Scholars Program, which is a STEM research program that they have for incoming freshmen for first generation, low income, and students of color interested in science research. And through Science Pathways, we get 3 summers of paid research in the labs around New York. And we get like a lot of one-on-one mentorship, especially through research, so that we stay interested in the field.
For me, I'm going into chem and bioengineering. And I chose this because similar to Emily, I wanted to go to the pre-med. So then I chose this because it satisfied the requirements for a pre-med field, and also it meets my interest in engineering. So I have a general interest in engineering and the sciences. So I decided to choose this field because it's a combination of both.
So my story is pretty similar, except that my major is called computational and neural systems. So it's a combination of computer sciences and neurosciences, and it deals with the overlap or intersection of the 2 fields. So I've heard that a lot of students will explore the intersection of computer science in neuroscience, with neural implants and those kinds of things, but also neuroscience and computer science with cognitive inspired computing, and basically taking a biological approach to AI and machine learning.
Awesome. Thank you so much for everyone for your responses. I think it's really interesting to hear. And I think some of you have already touched a bit about our next question, which is really great. But our next question is, what was your experience during Talaria Summer Institute last year? And how do you think that contributed to your application for college?
I had an amazing experience last summer. It was something brand new to me that I sort of signed up for on a whim, and I'm so thankful for it every single day. I was paired with a professor from UCSF who runs the cellular biology lab there, and she worked with me all summer very closely over Zoom, of course, helping me to write my paper on lysosome degeneration, lysosome dysfunction and neurodegenerative diseases, which is she helped me think about what I was interested, what I wanted to study, and then ultimately like hone in on a specific question. And I absolutely think this is one of the things that helped me stand out, especially with the UC schools. I mean, UCLA had a huge turnout in applications this year, like 150,000 kids applied. Like that's crazy. And I really think that having professional experience helped me stand out a lot. And I was actually even able, once COVID sort of died down and we were able to like go inside safely again, I was able to visit my mentor's lab because she's from UCSF, which is where I'm from. And I got to sort of go into her lab and meet her postdocs and graduate students and really like see what research she's doing, which was an amazing experience and just made me super excited about pursuing that in college. So
Similar to Emily, I just had such an amazing experience last summer. Found out about Talaria through like an Instagram ad, and I kind of just signed up like just because I thought, why not? It seems like a good way to spend my summer. I got matched with a microbiology professor at Sarah Lawrence College, which is right here in New York. And she was amazing. Like I went in with one idea for my paper and came out with something very different, but I'm not mad about it at all. I feel like there was a lot that I learned from her that really pushed me to keep majoring and studying environmental science and its intersections with public health, which is what my paper focused on. And I feel like it kind of like what Emily said, the professional like aspect of it really does give you a bit of a boost on applications, especially with me regarding science pathways, even though it is a program for students to get research experience. My interviewer, who is the director of the program at my college, told me that I was one of very few applicants who had like professional research experience and could speak on it. So I feel like if those sorts of programs like science and research programs are something you're interested in getting involved with right off the bat, Talaria is such a good jumping off point because you do get just a really great experience, even if it is virtual.
Yeah, for me, I also learned about Talaria from Instagram and then applied there. And it was like a really great experience because I got matched with this professor from WCU, and I walked in not really knowing what exactly I want to research about, but she walked me through like her research with her lab and her students, and then eventually I took part in her existing research and helped contribute to like the conclusion, which was really fun because then I was able to like learn so much about a whole new topic that I haven't really thought about before. And I still keep in touch with her to this day, and she even like helps write recommendations for me and everything. So it's like really great experience having like this one-on-one mentor that you like really bond over this month-long period. And also she was able to like help the entire process and like edit the paper and everything, and that really made me feel more confident in writing all my more research papers in my senior year, since I had to do my IB diploma. So then I had to like write research papers for like all my subjects. So yeah.
I also found out about Talaria through Instagram, I guess, like everyone else. When I applied though, I applied not really on a whim. I knew I wanted to do research the summer before senior year, especially because I felt that it was kind of like an area that I was lacking in, especially as a STEM applicant to like highly competitive schools. And I really wanted to go to a tech school where I know that a lot of STEM applicants have prior research experience or even do research competitions and different things. But that wasn't really something that was very accessible to me or something I had thought of prior to thinking about college applications. So it was a bit of like, oh, I guess I need to do something like this now. But even if it started off initially just like looking for stuff to pad my resume, I guess for college application, I genuinely was interested in it. I just hadn't thought of it before, if not for college applications. So when I applied, it was one of several like research summer programs that I applied to. And coming in, because I was doing like several other programs concurrently, I didn't have as much time to dedicate to it as probably a lot of other people did. So what my mentor recommended was to write a literature review instead, which was like instead of doing entirely new independent research. And so that way I would still learn a lot about a really interesting and unique topic, but I wouldn't be conducting any like original research, especially because it would be like my first research experience, which seemed a little bit daunting for me, especially with the limited time. What I ended up doing was I wrote a research paper on quantum cryptography, specifically the BB84 protocol. And this was like kind of an area that I was interested in before, but I didn't really know how to like really gain the technical knowledge that I needed to be able to write about it confidently. So my professor, her name is Dr. Naomi Nishimura, and she's from the University of Waterloo. So that's pretty far from where I live. So I guess, yeah, it was all on Zoom. And I haven't been able to like see her in person, but yeah, I do still keep in contact with her. And she actually wrote a few of my rec letters for some of my schools as well. So that did help in applications. But basically, she walked me through this process of how to kind of gather information, the different places that I could like find actual scientific articles and different things like that. And also the ones that were kind of, I don't know if you guys know, but like the ones that are behind like whatever, like a pay block or something like that, she had access to through her actual university subscriptions to a lot of these places. So that was like made it a lot more accessible for me as like just a regular civilian kind of person to access these high level papers and learn about these like advanced topics. And then once I did, I wrote my paper, and actually I hadn't written like a real research paper before. So doing that with her was super great because she could kind of walk me through the process because I like had literally very close to zero experience. But she kind of really spelled it out for me, like how everything should look or feel. And also reading a lot of other papers gave me good ideas. And then by the time I finished my paper, I actually ended up submitting it as part of like a research portfolio and different things like that to most of the universities I applied to. A lot of them will have like a place in their portal, if not like in the Common App or anything like that, in the school's individual portal to upload like any prior research or art or different things like that that you want to show the university. So that's what I ended up doing with my paper. So I do feel like it helped a lot. And specifically it being on quantum cryptography, I felt helped a lot because one of the other programs I was doing that summer also had to deal with cryptography. So I felt like it really contributed to creating a spike in my application, if that makes sense, in an area of interest that I kind of mentioned in my essays as well, because even though my major is computational and neural systems, I'm interested in seeing the applications of like AI and machine learning and cognitive inspired computing in general in the realm of cybersecurity and cryptography. So it seemed a little bit messy at first because I have a lot of different interests, but I feel like it was able to come together really well in my actual application when I would talk about what I was interested in my prior experiences.
Awesome. Thank you so much to everyone for your answers. We do have a question from the chat, which is a bit related to one of our other questions, which is, in U.S. college admissions, we need to request, recommendation letters from whether that's like your teachers or people outside or like maybe from extracurricular activities. So the question is that who should we get recommendation letters from, and what kind of people did you guys get recommendation letters for? And is it beneficial to get a Talaria Mentors letter or request to get a letter of recommendation from them?
Yeah, so I got a handful of recommendation letters. I tried to get one from every aspect of my life and my application. So I was a big athlete, so I definitely wanted a perspective from a coach. And then I also got a couple recommendations letters from teachers, who see me every day in the classroom and who really know me well and who I have a great relationship with. And I also did end up asking my mentor to write me a letter of recommendation, which I also think was really beneficial, especially someone who's in academia, probably at a university that's well known or not. I think that really helps you stand out. So
Yeah, so I also did request a letter of recommendation from my Talaria mentor, um, which was then kind of funny because when I sat down for an interview for the Science Pathways program, my mentor and the director of my program who was interviewing me knew one another. A lot of the New York area teacher, like professors, know one another, especially at all the historically women's colleges. So that was kind of nice. But similar to Emily, I did try and pull letters of rec from like all major aspects of my life, especially anywhere where on my list of extracurriculars there was like a sort of spike or like a really big focus on achievement. So besides my Talaria mentor, my main letters of rec were from one of my high school was a vocational high school, so we did things a little differently. So I've had a major since freshman year, which is the same major I'll have at college. So I had one of my major teachers write my letter of recommendation because she had taught me for all 4 years. She had overseen a lot of my like midterm and final projects, and she really knew me. And then I also had a letter of recommendation from um wasn't really a teacher, but it was like a community. She was one of my teachers, but she was also we also worked together outside of school because I founded like a organization in my community that she helped me run. So I had her write a letter of recommendation as well to kind of attest to like that aspect of my life. I think with STEM, it's always really good to have a really strong recommendation from like a teacher related with who teaches a subject related to whatever it is you want to study, and then something very outside of STEM because I feel like it shows that you can be a very dynamic person. So yeah.
For me, my school actually made all of us choose recommenders in May of our junior year. So I already had like my required recommenders from my school. But and also by like rec for my mentor, I meant like other programs and not college rec. But I will suggest that like you look into your teachers and like other aspects of your like coaches first, because they do some do require like it to be teachers or like someone who knows you like for a long period of time. But if there's like more that they request like more or like there's optional recommenders, then definitely like reach out to your mentor and ask for one.
Yeah, so for me, I don't think my recommender actually wrote me, or I don't think my mentor actually wrote me a recommendation for Caltech specifically. She did for a few of the other colleges I applied to, but she did make it clear though that whenever she wrote a recommendation letter, she didn't want it to be in the place of someone who had known me longer than she had, especially because she had just known me for 1 month. And she said she was happy to write the letter and everything, but she felt it would be more advantageous to my application if I prioritized teachers or other adults in my life who had known me for much longer. So what I ended up doing is I think I had my two main teachers who I got my recommendations from, especially because a lot of schools I applied to, they required one from a STEM teacher and one from an like English, humanities, social science teacher. So with that, I also did think a lot about who I was going to request recommendations from because I had requested a lot of recommendations for summer programs already. So I kind of felt out like who I thought might be good options and might not. And who I ended up settling on was my computer science teacher who taught me Python in I think junior year. So she taught me there, and I also earned a certification at Microsoft Technology Associate certification in her course, I also earned 100 in her like grading system. So I thought she could speak about me well technically. But besides that, she was also a club advisor for the club that I was president of that year, junior year in Technology Student Association. And she was also a club advisor for another STEM focused extracurricular that I was part of, which is called Cyber Patriot. And it's a cybersecurity competition, but it's a team. So she would see me for about like 6 hours on the weekend whenever we had competitions, and those were like every few months or so. And I was also one of the only girls participating there, or I was the only girl in sophomore year, I think, and then like second in junior year. So I felt like she knew me in a lot of different respects and that she could speak to me well there. So that's why I ended up choosing her, because she had a lot of overlap and she had seen me a lot in different capacities like leadership, competition, and like also just technical. And then for my English, what I ended up doing was, that was a little bit hard for me because for some schools you could choose any kind of humanities teacher that you wanted. So I was preferential to my psychology teacher, especially because a lot of my major specific stuff overlapped was like neuroscience and different things like that. But also I was really preferential to my freshman year English teacher because she had known me since about seventh grade, also through the same organization, Technology Student Association. She used to be an advisor there. She no longer was with our school at the time. She had retired, but I knew her through there and also the Technology Student Association. And even though I hadn't had, I guess, as much contact with her in like junior, senior year, because she had been retired, she had like kind of seen me grow up a lot, and she knew I was president, and like she was still checking with us for Technology Student Association. So I think for Caltech, what I ended up doing was I got a rec letter from my computer science teacher and my English teacher. And then there was an optional recommendation, and I got that actually from my physics teacher because he had taught me for about 2 years now, and I was one of the only girls in his courses as well. And he had spoken highly about me when I requested a recommendation from him for one of my summer programs. I don't remember if it was Talaria or a different one, but I had done that, and I felt like it really helped asking them for a rec letter for maybe like a state school or something first, just so that you know how they feel, kind of, or in my case, summer programs. Because I also had another computer science teacher who was like, he was in a lot of the same like extracurriculars that I was part of as well as an advisor. But he had recently immigrated from Turkey, so his English wasn't as great. And even though his rec letter was good, it ended up coming off as a little bit generic, or at least I felt when he shared it with me. So I had him write that letter for one of the state schools I had auto admission to, and I decided ultimately not to go with him in like the higher level schools like Caltech and whatnot, just because I felt like I wanted someone who could speak well to like different aspects of my personality. So yeah, sorry it was super long, but yeah, choosing rec letter recommenders is kind of a big deal, or at least it was for me, because it's one of the things like I can't really control how it goes, but I could choose people who I know would like kind of give me a better chance versus others. So yeah, I guess just do what feels right in the end, but try to consider different points of view, different perspectives.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for your answers. Really, really appreciate it. And you guys went really in depth. So I think that was super, super helpful. There is a question from our list, which is kind of, what do you think made your application stand out to colleges?
Okay, I can start. So I applied to schools through the Common App, but because I'm from California, I really focused on the UC system. So if anyone has any UC specific questions, because it is a different application, I'd be happy to answer those. But I would say my application stood out because I sort of used everything that I did in high school and just growing up, and I tried to apply that to what I wanted to do in the future. So for example, my big like key parts of my application were like volleyball. I've been playing volleyball for 10 years. I played for varsity, I played club, travel, I'm a coach. Like it's a huge part of my life. But it's not going to be what I do in college, and it's not going to be what I do for the rest of my life. So I wrote an essay about how volleyball, not specifically the sport, but different like situations are going to help me when I face challenges. It sounds okay. Now that I'm saying it, it sounds like kind of cliche, but I said, I used an example from what one of my coaches had told me, and I applied that to how I would face a problem in research. So I thought that was like a creative way to show how I'm a problem solver. And it was just like examples like that. I pretty much tailored, there's 4 essays for the UC system. They're all 350 words. And I pretty much tailored every single essay to say that I want to pursue research in the future. It's my big like talking point. Like it's what I want to do. It's what I'm going to start doing my freshman year. And that's why I love this program so much. But I use like every aspect of my life that I could, like how volleyball is going to help me, how running a club, like how running the environmental science club at my school is going to help me, and how taking extra college classes are going to help me. And I sort of just tried to tailor everything and funnel that into this one idea so that the person who's reading my application has a really clear picture of what I want to do at their institution and how I'm going to get that done. I think also, yeah, I think that's my big tip on essays. In terms of like how to stand out, I would say just play to your assets. Like we all have things that make us really, really special, and just talk about that. Like don't mention that you like did something like halfway. I would say really, really focus on things that you were successful in. And even if it doesn't sound as flashy as like, oh, say you like started a club but it didn't really like take off, or you couldn't really get it going, I would say just really brag about yourself. I know that's like kind of not a nice way to say it, but really like this is your opportunity. Do not be humble. Really, really play and talk about what you were successful in. Yeah.
Definitely agree with Evelyn on that last point. Once the Common App opens in August and you guys like get your first peek at it, or even Coalition, even though I haven't looked at it before, you don't get a lot of room to like talk about yourself. So really, really like play up all those little details. I think what really made my application stand out was a combination of my essays and my extracurriculars. I feel like extracurriculars definitely play a really, really big role. But I think when talking about that, people think that you need to have like all 10 slots in the Common App full of like all these clubs and awards and all this other stuff. Like I didn't really have that. I focused a lot of my extracurriculars because I didn't go to a typical high school. We didn't have sports. We didn't have a lot of AP classes. We didn't have IB. None of that. I think in all of high school, I took like 5 AP classes, and those are like the only 5 that they offer. So I really like narrowed it in with my extracurriculars. Aside from Talaria, I was able to graduate from a STEM program at like my local community college. I started during COVID, me and a few other of my classmates started kind of this like relief organization for our community because a lot of people lost their jobs. And we were able to get sponsorships from like CVS and a lot of other like big things. But that was honestly because that was like my main extracurricular for like all of high school. I did it for all like from sophomore year to like literally now. I've just passed it on to our juniors. And on my application, I did kind of what Emily said. Like I bragged. I had a really good log of like all the money we had raised and all the amount of donations we'd made and all that time. And I was just really upfront about like the numbers and everything, because at the end of the day, like that's what really shows the time and the effort and the dedication. I feel like when you really care about an extracurricular, it will really show, and being able to effectively communicate that then ties like right back into the essays. My personal statement is probably like my favorite thing I've ever written next to like one of my supplementals. But I feel like with essays, that's where you really get the room to like show your personality because you get like 20 words in the extracurricular thing. There's not a lot of room, but you get the supplements and the personal statement to really show them who you are. And like I remember like post submitting everything, I was like online, like finding other people who had applied to like some of my schools, and I was like talking about the essays with them. And one of the Barnard essays is like to write about a woman who you would like to sit down and have a conversation with. It doesn't matter if she's like real or fictional or dead or alive, just anyone, and what you would talk about. And you get 250 words to say all of that. People were talking about how they wrote about like Sylvia Plath and Michelle Obama. I wrote my essay about Megan Thee Stallion, as in like the Grammy award-winning rapper. And everyone was like, "Oh my God, Bria, how could you write like such a serious essay about like Megan Thee Stallion?" Lo and behold, um, at the admitted students like Zoom thing, admissions was talking about the most memorable essays, and they brought up how some girl wrote about Megan Thee Stallion. So have fun with your supplements and just like convey your personality because at the end of the day, like I'm not a Sylvia Plath girl, no shame to anybody who is, but me and Megan, we're ride or dies, and I was gonna make sure admissions knew that. So just have fun with it and make sure that they know who you are because things like that I feel like make you so much more dimensional than just like looking at your resume and your extracurriculars. They really get to know who you are as a person, and that lets them know where you stand dynamically with a lot of the other people they may have already admitted in earlier admission cycles, or just like what they look for and what they want their incoming class to be and what kind of traits and characteristics they want everyone to have. So yeah.
My gosh, I so vibe with what Bria just said because there's like this section in so for me I actually applied through QuestBridge, which is this early scholarship thing. And then there's like this section in my Princeton application supplements that ask like these like little questions about myself, like what's your favorite type of music and like little things. And then for my friends that are also applying, they're like thinking so seriously about it, like, oh my God, I need to show them like my techie side, my sciencey side, whatever, right? And then for me, I just had fun with it. I just like joked about whatever, and then it was like the most memorable supplement for me because like I was able to showcase different versions of myself and not just like the parts that I already shown in like my personal statement or like the more serious essays that asked more about like how I'll contribute to the school. Um, so definitely try to show like every part of yourself, and especially in the extracurricular section, I guess, try to talk about activities that you're actually passionate about. Like show them the numbers, show them like what you do in it, and then make sure that you choose ones that you're passionate about. If someone asks you in an interview, you could talk to them about it. So I made sure to show like different sides of myself while also like connecting them together to form like a story of myself, I guess, in a sense, while also showcasing like different parts. So then it won't just be like a narrow like um view of like just this girl that's going into pre-med, right? So like this girl that's going to pre-med also has various interests in this and that. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. As I mentioned earlier, I had a lot of different interests, and I feel like really knitting them all together, like through a personal statement or a supplement, is what made it a lot more marketable in terms of college admissions. Because at the end of the day, that is what it is. You're trying to sell yourself to admissions officers, and what you want to do is present a coherent narrative in which, like, all your extracurriculars, essays, and other things kind of line up to create this sort of character that they kind of feel like they get to know throughout the application process. Because once you like kind of humanize yourself beyond all like numbers and whatnot, that's what's probably going to get you into the school with like these really slim acceptance rates nowadays, rather than just the numbers. Of course, the numbers are really important too, so don't neglect that, obviously. But basically, a lot of the time, numbers are just used as like kind of a baseline. So everyone who doesn't meet a certain criteria or threshold will be further examined, and if there's not a like logical reason why they don't, then their applications won't really be considered further in terms of essays and extracurriculars, or at least this is what I've heard. But then after that, that's when they start to look at your extracurriculars and your essays and different things like that to see, kind of assess your fit with the school. And so I think that's like the number one area where I guess we're all talking about, we kind of stood out. And I think that's what needs to happen for you to be able to get into any number of these schools. So for me, I really felt like my extracurriculars were my strongest point in my application, just because like personally, like I think the most amount of my time I dedicated throughout high school was just to my extracurriculars, even more so than studying, or I guess what people might typically think high school is about, or what people might typically think gets you into these great schools. Um, for me, I felt that a lot of my extracurriculars, especially towards the end, started to kind of line up and create the coherent narrative that I was talking about. But also, I don't know if I did the best job of like showcasing this in my application, but I know for sure that like in some way or form it might have come across or peeked out. But I kind of really maxed on my extracurriculars to the extent that I could. There was like kind of a limit on how many you could do at my school, and like I was always hitting that limit of how many leadership positions you could have, of like how many competitions you could do, different things like that. But not to say like quantity over quality or anything, but that kind of, I don't know how to say it, it showed my investment in those extracurriculars rather than them just being something I did for college applications. So there was like kind of a lot of school records and things involved in there. In terms of like leadership, I was always at the highest leadership position that anyone in my school had been in or higher. A lot of the extracurriculars I participated in were like organizations that were national or like state level organizations, so I could pursue higher leadership positions in there beyond just my school. As well as the competitions that I was doing, I felt like it was good because you would have quantifiable results. And especially like my junior year, I felt like I had a lot of quantifiable things to put on my application, because I think everyone wants to say that when they're in a leadership position, they make an impact, but it's hard to convince an AO if you don't have like numbers behind it. I know we just talked about how like numbers are baseline, but then once you get to this extracurricular section and different things, numbers kind of become like something that does help you stand out from other applicants. So in terms of TSA Technology Student Association, when I was president, we sent a record number of entries to nationals, like 7 as compared to 0 to 2 in previous years. In the other extracurricular, I talked about Cyber Patriot. I think that was the first year that we ended up going to like nationals. So it's, these kinds of things are like, I guess they're pretty important in my opinion if you do want to stand out, or at least for me, because like beyond that, I was a pretty average student, I guess. And I guess in a sense we all are, because even if we have high stats, there are a lot of other people who do have high stats too. And doing these things really shows your passion, because at the end of the day, I think what universities really want are students that have a lot of grit in terms of like passion, perseverance, and purpose. And doing these things really shows that, and especially if you can tie it all together really well in your essays, which I feel like I did only like a mediocre job of doing. But as you can see, like the other panelists here, like definitely did a great job, and I think that really contributed to them getting in, and as well as me, even if mine wasn't the best as I thought it could be. And the last thing I did want to say about it was that I think with the standout aspect, I don't know, like you really have to focus on getting to your base level stuff first and then trying to stand out after that. So if you're not able to meet certain metrics, like in terms of grades or SAT and other things like that, I do feel like it's worth your time to invest in those as well. And then after that, if you have all this other time, like then I do feel like you should definitely go after things you're passionate about. Even if it doesn't always make sense, because for me, a lot of my extracurriculars didn't like kind of line up until the end, when I was like, hey, there's a cognitive inspired computing major or like something related to that. So you might not know exactly how it's going to shake out, but usually if you're following your passion, you'll end up in the right place. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Evelyn, for your advice and insight. There's a lot of us here who are, starting our college process. And one of the things is, finding out what colleges to apply to. And so the question is, how did you create your college list? Or, how did you narrow it down to the colleges that you want to apply to?
I actually started my college research on YouTube, and I looked up blank university vlogs or like blank university day in the life. And so that's how I kind of like figured out what schools I could have been interested in. That's one way you can start. I know it's like a really intimidating process to go on those big search engines and like pick and like filter what you want to see. That can be really intimidating. So I recommend that if you're looking for some entertainment, if you're like bored. But like more specifically, obviously there's like all of those things that you have to think about: size of the school, location, how far you want to go, do you want a public school, a private school, all that kind of jazz. But I would say YouTube was a really good resource for me. Also, I went to a lot of online and like virtual tours, sort of like this, where I would talk to students. I would be able to ask them questions, and a lot of the times they were really small groups, like smaller than this, like 10, 20 people. And so I was really able to ask them specific questions without feeling like the pressure of like everyone listening to what I want to know. And that also led me to like talking to students individually. Like I met this girl on a virtual tour, and she was like, do you have more questions? And I was like, yeah, I have more questions. She's like, here's my phone number, like call me. And I was like, okay, great. So then I got to like talk to her like and ask her really specific questions about her experiences at the school, which was great. And I feel like now after like COVID, there's still a lot of virtual options, which is great. You don't have to like fly across the country to see a school if you can't, if that's not in your means. So I would say definitely use the internet. That's like your best friend. Yeah.
Similar to Emily, my like research journey for colleges started on Niche, my favorite, the Holy Grail. The website, you literally just type in the names of like different schools across the country, and you'll get like this whole page that like shows you roughly how much it costs when you have like an average amount of like assets and income. You can see reviews from like actual students, how big the student body is, what type of majors they have, and how many people like graduate from those majors. And then from there, I would go on YouTube or like TikTok, and I just type in like the name of the school or like the name of like the biggest building on campus or something, just to see like what came up. Because I feel like people get very like honest, and they show like how it really is on campus and stuff, which is how I realized I didn't want to go to Northeastern. No shade to Northeastern, but I didn't want to live in a hotel for 4 years. So overcrowding wasn't it for me. And then um okay, so I would like look up the name of a school followed by like the word like confessions or something on Instagram, and you can find these pages of like actual students who like anonymously send stuff in about their schools, or you can see pictures of like the dining hall food, which was how I ended up crossing so many schools off my list, because it's just like, I know dining hall food is bad, but maybe not that bad. um but really, like, the internet is your best friend, and I kept a Google Doc of every single school I ever researched, and, like, how big the school was, if it was rural or suburban or in a city, if they offered my major or something similar. Because I applied as an environmental science major to most of my schools, but some schools didn't have it, so I applied as a bio major. Coincidentally, every school I got rejected from. Um so just like the internet is genuinely your best friend. And then like Emily said, on the websites for schools, you can find um like Zoom meetings that they'll host where they'll talk about different things. So like I applied to WashU, and they had a Zoom for like everything. If you had questions about financial aid, there was a Zoom for that. If you wanted to take a virtual tour with the students, you could do that. Like you would get on a Zoom like this, and there would be like 5 people on different parts of campus just showing you the building. And that's how I saw a lot of my schools. I also then broke into campus for the school I'm going to. But I don't recommend that because you can get in trouble.
Well, so for me, I had a college mentor help me narrow down And I based it off like reach, safety, and target, and like a specific amount for each. So that was like my main list. Um, that was like for my college list, but then my main list will be QuestBridge since I actually only applied through QuestBridge. And for that, I first applied through the junior program, in which I had like this national conference thing where I talked to every school on the list. So there's only 40 schools on the that I could apply through QuestBridge, and then I talked to like all the admission counselors and like the students in there. So I had a general feel, and then I had to like cross out like based on like my major. Um, I didn't really care about like school size or location. I honestly want to get as far away from home as possible. So probably like all the New York ones though. And then I also like talk to others. Like I know a lot from people from my school that are like older than me. So I talk to them about like how their school has been so far. So definitely reach out to your network. And then Google definitely. Yeah. So based on like a drafts of lists that I found, drafts of like college lists, I Google schools and then like went further, like definitely confessions. Yeah, those are good. And then just looked more into it. That's how I narrowed down.
So for me, I I think I had the opposite problem. I was not selective at all. Like I started off with a spreadsheet of about 20 schools, and mostly it was based on admission statistics, like how likely I felt like I was to get into the school. Because actually, like in general, I'm not a very specific person. It's like my belief that you can be happy anywhere. It might be a little bit harder in some places rather than others. But for me, the things that I valued at the school were more like the rigor of the academic program and how well I felt like it was gonna fit in terms of I guess just like preparing me for like CS software engineering kind of stuff because it's like pretty competitive career in general and I wanted to be really well set up going into that. Probably I shouldn't have been stressing so much about it, but besides that, I started up with a lot of schools. I had to narrow it down actually, and the way I did that actually wasn't really by like my preferences because I did know I had certain preferences. I actually really was hoping to stay. Idealistically, I would have wanted to stay close to home or even like in my home and just commuted to school. That's not going to end up happening. But I mean, there's certain things like that. So I wanted to be close to home. I actually prefer like a rural or suburban setting, and like a few different things like that. But what that actually ended up helping me out more with was once I got my acceptances, choosing where I was actually going to go to college. But in terms of like narrowing it down, I think it was just like I talked to my parents a lot about it because like some schools they just didn't really want me going because they felt like I might not do well in in a certain area. Like in general, like my health is a little um shaky like when it gets to like really cold places. Like I don't have the best blood circulation, so like my legs go numb and cold even in Houston cold. So, things like that. But I still did end up applying to like MIT because like tech school. So that was kind of the thing for me, like seeing which factors outweighed others and where I could kind of compromise and where like certain things like, health or like food or different things would kind of outweigh the value of a certain program for me or like class size. That's something I was super interested in as well. But I think, yeah, I wasn't too selective. I would recommend being more selective, but I think mainly that came because I was doing it out of a place of fear too, because I thought like, oh, maybe I won't get accepted to like any of the schools on my list, so let me apply to like a lot of them, right? But at least here in Texas, we have like an auto admission program for top like however many percent in your graduating class. So top 10% get automatic admission to pretty much every state school, and then top 6% get auto admission to UT Austin as well. But I didn't have auto admission to UT Austin, and I did to Texas A&M, but their College of Engineering is relatively competitive. So it's not a guarantee that I would get into the College of Engineering, even if I were to get into the university. So I think because of that, I was really nervous throughout the entire process and wanting to like kind of shoot my shot with as many schools as I could. But I definitely recommend applying to like a fewer amount so that you can spend more time trying to get the best quality app that you want. For me, I kind of felt like I wouldn't be happy if I didn't at least take a chance with some of these schools just because I had been like looking into them for so long and like I had come to care about them for some reason or another. But I guess in the end, just do what makes you comfortable. With my admissions process, I kind of wanted to have no regrets and like I didn't want to feel like, oh, I could have been possibly denying myself a good opportunity just because most of my schools were reaches because I had auto admission to one school and I figured if I don't get into the major there, I'll still just go there and I'll try to transfer in later. Um, but yeah, it was kind of a non-traditional experience. And I don't know if you guys got as much from that as I would have hoped you did, but hopefully you could take away something from that and just do what feels right and then for you. And definitely apply to schools where you have fee waivers. I had fee waivers for 2 of my schools, including the one that I ended up attending, and also one like really close to home. And both of those schools actually invited me to virtual fly-in programs. Fly-in programs are a really good resource as well if you're having a limited amount of schools that you're going to be applying to. I don't know if they're doing them in person again this year, but normally you can apply to a fly-in program, or if you're invited to apply to a fly-in program. And if you get accepted, what they do is they'll fly you out to the university like for no cost with a bunch of other students, and you'll get to kind of learn about campus and talk to current students. So a lot of the things that the other panelists were talking about, but in person for the last few years, it was virtual just because COVID and things like that. But it was still a really great experience. And I ended up doing that for Caltech as well at the beginning of senior year. And it was a really great experience. And it made me a lot more passionate about applying to Caltech specifically and for my other schools as well, the ones that I did go to those programs for. But yeah, do what feels right for you. If you want to apply to a lot, apply to a lot. If you want to apply to a few, do that and make sure you submit quality apps.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your answers, everyone. We have one question which asks, what was the reason for choosing your school over the other schools that you applied into?
Well, for me, I'm from California. I mentioned that. And the UCLA was just the best fit for me out of all. At the end of the day, I had received all my decisions. If you guys didn't know, this year was a little bit tougher than years before. So we did get some bad news, but that's okay. UCLA ended up being the best school that I had gotten into. It was in California. It's about an hour flight from me, so it's like a 6-hour drive. It was far enough away from home that I was like, okay, that's good. It was a really big school, and I was kind of excited about the like raw spirit kind of thing, without giving up amazing academics. It is like the best public school, so I was like really honored to have even gotten in. Also, like LA is a cool area, and it has the #1 dining hall. So I was like, sold. I'm sold on that.
So jealous right now. I'm about to get a taste of that dining hall food this week. So fingers crossed for me. Um, I chose Barnard. Well, I applied to Barnard completely on a whim. It was never part of my original like lineup, but during my search, everybody was like, Bria, you have to apply to Barnard. Like you just have the personality, like you just have the fit, which I feel like is something that's also really important, like how you like if you fit the environment of a school. Um, and then like one of my closest friends was like, "Oh, I'm applying to Barnard," and I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna get the fee waived anyway, so why don't I just apply? And it would be funny if we both got in and we like lived together and everything." Um, and then I ended up getting in. So I ended up choosing it because it's technically out of state, but it's not too far from where I live right now because I'm in northern Jersey, but I literally live like a 30-minute train ride from campus. Um, so it's far enough away. I also feel like New York is just like such a place to be when you're like young and in college and stuff. And of all my schools, it just offered the best combination of things from the really generous financial aid. They were the only school that covered more than 100% of my need. along with like my admittance to science pathways and the opportunities that would grant me, because I'm really interested in continuing scientific research throughout my career, as well as just the vibe of the school. I feel like if you're really into the idea of sisterhood and you don't like a ton, like you don't want to be in a super competitive environment, but you still want a really conducive 4-year education, you want to be surrounded by like very just empowering people. Like all the people I've met who go to my school are like so nice. And it's so nice to meet people who feel very similarly to you when it comes to your interest in STEM or like just your dedication for a subject in general. I feel like going out your comfort zone and looking for schools like that is also really good. More than 100%. Just to answer that while I'm here, I genuinely have no clue how that happened. Um, Barnard is one of few schools who I think does need blind admission, which means that when you apply, they do not look at your financial information until after they've already decided whether or not you've been accepted, waitlisted, or rejected. So that means that whatever the outcome is, if you are accepted, they have to cover 100% of your need. So my expected family contribution was like in the 30,000s, which is kind of high, but they covered my entire tuition, which is over $60,000. And they were my only school who did that. And I think part of it was because I was in science pathways and they wanted me to like say yes. Because they were pretty generous with financial aid from what I'm hearing from everybody. But I genuinely don't know. Like it just kind of happened. A lot of schools, what they do is if they offer you a merit scholarship, it can subtract from your need-based aid. But Barnard doesn't offer academic scholarships. They just meet your immediate financial need. So definitely look into the type of schools, like financial policies, because I feel like that's also really important, and what their policies are when it comes to financial aid, because I know very, very few schools do need blind admission.
For me, I was interested in a liberal arts school that also had like a strong research program, so Princeton. And I was also interested, I was like really into the low student to teacher ratio. So I believe they had like a 10-to-1 or something, teacher to student to teacher ratio, which was like really appealing to me. In addition, they had like this open curriculum of which like I could just do anything and pursue anything that I wanted, and a strong alumni network, which is also something that I was looking forward to, because I want to be able to like connect with past students and like get opportunities. So when I was talking to like past past alumni, they were all like talking about like the strong network that they could always reach out to. And like every year they had like this huge event which like a bunch of alumni can come back, and then like you talk to them, get opportunities from them. So I was like, and also I guess like financial aid. For me, Princeton was actually not my top school because I wanted to go like far, far away, so like California. But it was something that my parents and I could compromise on because it was out of state, but not like too far away. So I guess yeah.
So for me, it was it was not much of a hard choice. I really felt like I fit very well with my school, um, just because I think it mirrored a lot of the kind of the atmosphere that my high school or the high school I came from had, but also it kind of filled the gaps, like the things I was like, oh, I wish that like my high school did this, or I wish my high school did that. They did that at Caltech. So like it was like everything that I had come from and more, if that makes sense. I had other really good options too, especially because I did mention that I wanted to stay home and I got into Rice, which is in Houston. And so I said, like, I live just outside of Houston. So it was like, there was like always that like kind of appeal of like staying home and doing kind of preferentially what I wanted to do, I guess. As well as the fact that they offered me merit money, and a lot of people I knew went to Rice, like just because we're all from the same area and things. There was also like other schools like that to. Like my state school is like UT Austin has a great computer science program, super pre-professional and really, really nice. Again, I knew like quite a few people over there, and Texas A&M was actually my dad's alma mater. He did his master's there though, not undergrad, but there was a lot of good options like that. And also I think Georgia Tech, which was number 5 for computer science, which is actually like ranked above Caltech kind of. So if like you care about rankings and things like that, the decision might have changed a little bit. But for me, like there was just none of the schools that I had gotten into like fit as well as Caltech. Like I mentioned before, I felt like I could be happy anywhere, but like I felt like I would really be happy, especially at Caltech, because there was a few things. Like they are a really, really small school. I think total accepted students was 450, and then like actually coming are 250 or so. So like 200 to 250 per class size. So in total, there's like less than 1,000 undergrads, like close to 800 or so. And I think that was something that really interested me, because coming from my school, my graduating class size was like 156. And I really enjoyed being in like a very close-knit atmosphere. And then when I visited campus, they actually had not a fly-in program, but I guess like an admitted students weekend or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but I think Discover Caltech or Discotech. They actually paid for like my entire trip to come out there, so it was like all expenses paid, the plane tickets and everything, and even like the car transportation once we were there and everything. So I think like the fact that the school actually like took care of you like really nicely was a big factor as well. And when I was on campus, it was like so magical. Like every current student I talked to, I could relate to them in some way or another. And then when I would talk to them about these super nerdy things, like just like math, even like they would understand what I was talking about, not in a technical sense, but like in the way I felt about the subject, and in the way that like I wanted to experience it when I came here to Caltech. Everyone was super like friendly and warm. And the other thing is about the school, the reason I wanted to apply to tech schools in general is because like career-wise, they really do set you up very well. They prepare you very well for like pre-professional tracks or for graduate school or researcher if that's something you want to do. And in general, I've heard at Caltech and MIT specifically that there are more research positions open than there are undergraduate students. So if you do want to get a research position or get some kind of experience like that, it will be very accessible for you to do so. It won't be difficult. And one of the things I learned once I was admitted was that actually there is the Career Advising and Experiential Learning Center. I think that's what it's called. They send out a newsletter like every 2 weeks or so, and it has all these different opportunities for you in terms of like career, internship, research, all these things. And they actually like link you to a portal where you can connect further, like take the next steps to apply to that position and different things like that. So they really like make it very efficient and remove all blocks for you. And I had never been in a position like that where there was like all these different opportunities and you just basically choose. Like even with summer programs and different things like that, you have to go out of your way and apply and like find these different things for yourself if you want to do that. But with Caltech, it was really a place where I felt like they really wanted to see you succeed, and they would take the time to nurture that passion that you had already. And one of the final things was that Caltech is a very like I don't know how to say it. Like I don't want to say a chill school, but it is chill in a sense. The workload is famously like enormous, but at the same time, the professors are willing to give extensions. A lot of the exams are take-home exams, which means you can take them at any time within a certain testing window. So if you do better like morning testing or afternoon or whatever, then you can do what works for you. And then the problem sets or like homework are meant to be like all pretty much all the time collaborative. And it's supposed to mirror like the way the actual world works in STEM, like just career-wise and like research and science. So like all these really unique aspects about Caltech really sold me on it. And of course they were super generous with financial aid as well. I think that's something with like high level schools like that. I don't know if they were need blind or not. I think they might have been as well, but it was like a common because seeing amongst panelists that like financial aid was really great. I think actually it would cost close to the same for me to go to my state school or like any of my other schools. But the thing is, like Caltech's like actual like just raw bill is way higher than those schools. So the amount of financial aid they offered me made it like comparable to my other options. So I wasn't spending very much more than I would have been going somewhere else. And it was really great in general, just like especially with the fly-in and everything. So yeah, there was a lot of great things about Caltech, and I encourage you guys to look for a lot of really good options so that you're not more or less choosing one school over another, but like the school is the one that really stands out to you from your list when you go there, so that you know you're going to be like for sure really happy over there.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for your advice for that. And we have time for one last question, which is, what do you think is the hardest thing to do during college applications or in the college applications? And do you have advice for overcoming it?
I definitely think the hardest part of the college app process is the personal statement. I feel like of everything, it was like the biggest, I feel like labor of love is very generous, but the personal statement I feel like is just the hardest because not only is it very daunting that like the biggest way to like tell these people who have never met you and are going to be reading like thousands of other applications is like 600 words, but it's also just the fact that like what are you supposed to say? You know, I feel like that's what everybody kind of wonders or like asks themselves before they actually sit down to write it. Um and like I said before, I'm probably like the most proudest of my personal statement next to like some of my supplements that I really had a lot of fun writing. Um, the personal statement does not have to be serious. I'm gonna be so honest. I feel like a lot of people think that you need to have like this big monumental thing happen to you in like your very few years of life, and you need to like pour your heart out to these people who don't know you or like sell them some sob story. It does not have to be like that. You can genuinely write about whatever you want. I have seen people write their personal statement essay about their ramen recipe, and that got them into like Johns Hopkins. So please, like, relax because it is terrifying. I get it, but it's not as bad. And don't do what I did, because I had a personal statement done and I sent it to my state schools, which have Rutgers has their own application site, so it wasn't through Common App. Sent it to Rutgers, got into my state schools because they did it like early, and then realized 3 days before everything else was due that I hated my personal statement and I felt it was a terrible representation of me as a person. So then I spent like 6 hours rewriting it, and I think there's like 7 drafts of that thing. But it was an idea that when I was first thinking about what to write, a lot of people told me, oh, like you're doing too much and it's not going to come together and you're trying to say like way too much all in one go. It was the only idea that I had that I had drafted that felt like it was really telling people who I was. My essay My essay was about how my childhood hatred of avocados tied into like my not like other girls syndrome growing up, and then how getting involved in STEM fixed that. I also now do really love avocados. And it sounds like an absolute mess, but when you sit down and you read it and you feel like you put so much of yourself into this essay and you have other people read it. So I had a lot of people like look it over in those last 3 days I had. Um, you get a lot of good feedback about, especially from people who have known you for a really long time, about how it defines you as a person or what it says about you. And if they knew nothing about you, like what would what would your personal statement say to them? So definitely like go online and read a few practice essays. I know Johns Hopkins posts like the essays that worked on their website, and I read a lot of those, but don't read so many that you're like internalizing the fact that these people are writing about how like a cafe that their parents own like revolutionized their their entire life. Like not everybody has like this big monumental shift happen to them, and that's completely okay. As long as your personal statement is a really honest reflection of who you are and it shows a lot of like growth over time, you will be fine.
Yeah, for me, the personal statement was also the hardest part of the essay because I honestly just did not know what to write. Um and I had to like talk with so many people. It felt like getting therapy. Like it was just a lot. And then I started off with like 3 different drafts about like different ideas that I came up with. Um Various drafts of those and then eventually like forming one. Um Continuing working on that, so that was like it came to around like 5 drafts on that one essay. And then eventually like Bria, like realizing that I didn't like it. So I spent like a lot of like so Questbridge was due in September 28th. And I spent a lot of like days going up to that date, working on it. So I remember like my birthday, which happens to be September 27th, the entire day just like working on it, making final preparations. Um, and it's difficult. It's like this one thing that's sent to all your colleges, right? And the one thing that like supposed to like be the first thing they see about you, the first thing that you want to like form some kind of story about yourself. Um, so for this, I really recommend just like yeah, getting a lot of people read yours over, but try not to like read too much of other people's, because then eventually you might get to like this phase like I did where you want to like kind of replicate how they're written, because like you get inspired, because eventually ultimately all the essays that are posted out there are ones that people are really proud of or people that they think are really good, so you get inspired and then sometimes you might want to replicate how they are written. Try not to do that. I did that after like reading over too much and then I had to like rewrite mine, but definitely like write your own story, tell something you're passionate in, and getting a lot of different other people's feedback. So I got teacher to like give feedback on like the practical sense, friends to like give feedback on like which parts stood out to them, which parts I should elaborate. So definitely get like a lot of different perspectives and then try to tell your own story first though.
So in terms of like the hardest thing in college app season is like, for me at least, it was time management. Not in that I was wasting time, but basically like I would get tunnel vision, I guess. Especially because like even the summer before senior year, I really wasn't working on apps. I had like 5 different summer programs going on, so I was really just putting all of my time and effort into that. And then even once first semester of senior year came, especially for Caltech, I didn't end up applying early because I had talked to their admissions officers and things through that virtual fly-in program, and they told me to wait because I hadn't taken calculus yet, so I was taking it senior year. So I would be spending like all this time on my calc assignments and things like that because I wanted to learn it like as best as I could and get like as high of a grade as I could. Um, and like it's great because like I do love learning and it was a great experience and I really love calc now, especially because of that. But you know, I could have been working on like personal statements and things like that that also take up a lot of time. Um, like regarding college apps during that time as well. So that was a bit difficult, especially because I wanted to apply to a lot of schools early action, but I didn't end up being able to because after the summer programs were over, I actually like went straight into volleyball season and I was my school's team captain that year. I guess I didn't talk much about volleyball, like I think our other panelists did, but it is also a really big part of my life, especially in the fall. And so it took up a lot of my time because I really wanted to do well that year, especially for my teammates and for myself. We hadn't had volleyball the previous year just because our school was fully online. So coming back was a big deal, and like senior season was really emotional for me just because I had been playing for so long. I played all 4 years varsity, and as our starting setter in that year, I was going to be the captain. So dedicating my time to things like that made it a bit difficult, like in the end, to try to I guess meet all the goals I had in terms of college apps, and I did end up having to restructure some things like, you know, putting some things regular decision instead of early action. but ultimately I did feel like it worked out for the best. The only part was that um, I also had a similar story with my personal statement. I wrote one for my state schools, which was good, and that got me in. But I didn't really like it for my Common App schools just because I wanted to write about things in the supplemental essays that were from my main essay, which were for my state school. So it wouldn't work well for like the same Common App essay. So I definitely recommend checking out the supplements and seeing what you want to write about in those and making your personal statement something different from that, or like sowing the seeds or like mentioning it in your personal statement, but not going too much in detail because you want to have different stories to be able to showcase like what you're doing. But basically, the story is what happened. I was gonna finish up like my apps over the break, like most seniors do, like winter break, and I got COVID for a week or so out of the 2 weeks that we were free. So I ended up having to jam a lot of like my app stuff until like the last week, which was super stressful. I had a very bad sleep schedule. I was like just waking up at like 11 and then not sleeping again until like 4 a.m. Like, so it was really crazy because like I don't know, sometimes like when you're working that much, you start to work better in like certain times rather than others and like whatever, and you just got to get it done and like push through, right? So it was pretty bad, like pretty unhealthy for like about a week solid, and then I didn't even end up going back to school for like 3 days after because I was still like kind of sick, and like I even missed a few like extracurricular commitments and things like that just because like I kind of went all in on whatever I was doing at any time in senior year. And so that time it was college apps, and it kind of third quarter was a little bit difficult for me. I guess relatively speaking, it was still fine because like my GPA stayed the same and everything throughout senior year. But also afterwards there were technical difficulties with my apps. My recommenders couldn't submit through Common App, so I had to go through like 16 schools and figure out the alternate recommendation process for each of those, and then like kind of relay that information to my recommenders. So doing these kinds of things, like it's best to pre-plan if you can and manage your time well if you can. But if things do go wrong, try not to worry. Things worked out okay for me, and I'm sure if you keep trying and keep pushing till the end, it should eventually work out well for you, and I'm sure it will. It's just there's going to be a lot of hurdles, obstacles, so try not to think too much. Just do what you can. Keep pushing through, even if there are mistakes made. You can get through it, and you'll be fine.
Awesome. So I believe that's all the time we have for today for questions. Thank you everyone for joining our U.S. College Admissions Panel featuring our amazing Talaria alumni today. And on behalf of Talaria, really thank you so much to the panelists today for your time. And your insight and advice was like super helpful and super informative. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great time at your respective universities in the fall. And I just want to say thank you to everyone else who attended our events for the year, and as well as our college panel for today. So thanks again to everyone for your time today. Yeah, have a great rest of your evening or your day.